Okay, so we're going through Indisputable Truth. We talked about the subjects of how God exists. We talked about the subjects of, the moral argument, the need for religion. We talked about the idea of what is God. Now we're getting to the topic of which religion is God given. Why are we talking about this now? Because once you basically say that there's a God, right, and we prove that he must be running the world, because he's willing it to exist, because infinite is all-encompassing, right? Like we said last time. Then it must be, if he created the world, he didn't do it for no reason. There must be a purpose, right? Every creation you see, you see there's a purpose. You see a table, you see a chair, you see an iPhone, you see a Mac, whatever you see, right? You know that the person created it for a reason. So we see this complex world, which a lot of craziness, which a lot of things going on, and we have to assume ourselves there must be a purpose. Now that's where religion comes in. Religion tries to say, I know the purpose for why God created us. I know the purpose. You want to hear something crazy, by the way, with this whole topic? I went on ChatGPT, and I want to see, what is ChatGPT going to say about this? 4.0, okay? I said, ChatGPT, if you had to, hypothetically, you're a robot, so you're whatever, pick if God exists or God doesn't exist. What would you go for? Would you be a believer or not? So ChatGPT was being a little bit liberal with me. I'm a robot. I don't answer this stuff. This is hypothetical, whatever. I'm like, listen, in a hypothetical situation, you have to answer, where would you put your money? ChatGPT, the smartest AI, he said I would point towards believing in God rather than atheism. Then I said, okay, fine. You believe in God. Now, if you had to go through all the religions and one of them had to be from God, what would you pick? What would be your best bet? Then he said, okay, I would go to the monotheistic religions. Out of everything, there's polytheism, idolatry, all these different stuff. There's deism, where you just believe God created the world and doesn't run. He said, I believe in monotheism. Okay, fine. So he said, out of all the monotheistic religions, pick what's your best bet of what you think is from God. Okay? ChatGPT tells me, out of all the options and historical evidence and whatever, I choose Christianity. Then I challenge ChatGPT. I say, ChatGPT, based off of, I start going through the proofs of Judaism. I showed ChatGPT Christianity, basically is blind faith. I said there's no evidence. It started with one person. Judaism started with millions of people, whatever, different things, right? And ChatGPT's, based off what you said, you're right. I would choose Judaism. Out of all the religions and cults and all the evidence pointing towards Judaism, and that Judaism is the only religion that has, evidence, and every other religion is blind faith and whatever, all that stuff, ChatGPT chose Judaism as being the only God-given religion. Crazy? So now that we're going in this topic, it's a good intro for which religion is God. Let's read it inside. Okay. So, okay. Now that we have considered the subject and seen the compelling evidence for the existence of a creator, the question we are left with is, why did the creator create us? Think about it. By definition, God is He's the ultimate and infinite superpower. God is the ultimate and infinite superpower who created the entire universe. God clearly has no limitation and is perfect. He doesn't get bored or need anything. Indeed, he has lacked nothing and always will lack nothing. Perfection is perfection. So, why would God create the universe? Logic compels us to say that there must be a reason for why he created us. In other words, it appears that God did not create this universe randomly. After close examination, it is clear that everything in this world was created for a purpose. For example, we know that the purpose of a chair is for a person to sit on. We can see that even small creatures such as bees have a purpose in this world. As they are an essential part of the ecosystems, bees are needed to pollinate various plants and maintain proper and healthy vegetation around the world. Without bees pollinating plants, the world would not be able to sustain billions of people. It's needless to say that if something as small as a bee is so important for the world's existence and has a purpose, then the most complex form of life, which is the human being, must also have a purpose, and far likely more important than a bee. If a bee has a purpose, obviously we must have a purpose. There are some people, this is the idea of deism, people are deists, who make the claim that we are created by God. However, they believe that although there may be a purpose for our existence, it is impossible to know, since they believe God doesn't intervene in the universe nor interact with mankind. However, so we disprove deism, the idea that someone created the world and God created the world and left, because we say that if infinite is all-encompassing, God is willing the universe to exist. So if you say God left the world, it's no different than saying I'm thinking a thought and I stop thinking about the thought. it stops existing. The world wouldn't exist. That means God is willing it to exist. That means he's involved with the world, right? So, however, it wouldn't make sense for God to create mankind with a purpose and then take a step back and expect us to know what that purpose is and fulfill it. Imagine, I talked to a deist before, had a debate with him, and I said, listen, you believe God created the world? Then there must be a purpose. So I said, what's the purpose? And I told him, don't you think not only that there is a purpose that God would communicate to the most complex being, mankind, the only beings that are conscious. You could tell a bee, you could tell an animal, they won't understand what it means when you say purpose of life, right? We're the only conscious beings that can understand that idea. So I asked him, don't you think there must be a purpose for us? Don't you think that he must have communicated to mankind that purpose? So it doesn't make sense that God would create the world and step back and expect us to know what the purpose is without telling us. We wouldn't be able to know what our purpose is in this world unless God communicated to us. In other words, if there is a reason for why the Creator created the world and human beings are the most complex and conscious creations within it, then it's only logical to assume that the Creator must have communicated his message or some kind of instruction manual on what the purpose of life is to mankind. There must be someone or a group of people in the world who possess this information. This is where religion comes in to answer the question of what is the human being's purpose in the world. Many religions claim that they received the word of God in regards to the purpose of life, and by following their religion, you're fulfilling God's will and your purpose in this world. Meaning, that's where religion comes in. That's why this religion is people make such a big deal. Because if there's a purpose, religion is trying to make the claim of what the purpose is. So, however, which religion should one follow? Throughout history and to this very day, there have been over 10,000 different religions and cults around the world. And each have their own distinct beliefs. Many of these religions and cults have certain beliefs which contradict each other. For example, Judaism doesn't believe Jesus is the Messiah. Christianity does believe Jesus is the Messiah and teaches that if you don't believe Jesus is the Messiah, then you're doomed for eternal hell. It is obvious that both of these ideas cannot be correct. You can either believe in one of them or the other, but not at the same time. There are countless of other examples of many major contradictions between religions, especially in regards to the main principles of faith. Therefore, if God gave his will to humanity, there can only be one religion that is truly from God. There's so many people, I talk to them, how do you know which religion is from God? They say all of the religions, they're all right. Everybody's right. Peace out, live free, everyone's right. No, we said in the ideas we need to consider that if something is contradictory, right? If they're, what do we say? We said that reality is not relative. There's something called reality. It can't be relative. You can't have the Christian being right, the Muslim being right, the Jew being right, the Hindu being right. They're all contradicting each other. Their religions are literally total contradictions. If you really understand it, if you said they're all equal, they're all right, that means you never ever study these religions to know what the heck they're saying in the first place. Because there's no way they both can be right. It's just a logical, contradiction. That's why the whole proof, the whole section of reality is not relative. It's so pertinent because if the guy's arm is broken, one guy can't say it's broken and one guy says it's not broken. It's either broken or not. Same thing with this. Either one religion right and everything is wrong. There can't be two religions that are right. Again, if they're not contradicting each other, they're not contradicting each other. But basically, every religion and cult is contradicting each other. Okay, so there can only be one game maker, one right answer. And I said, what I was saying before is that if God must have communicated to mankind. So if God did communicate to mankind, and that's where religion is, that's where everybody, and there's a purpose, that means one of these, out of the many options we have, one of them has to be right. Just by logical thinking. Okay, fine. You can't say none of them are right, by the way. Do you know why? Because then who did God communicate his message to? Where is the message? What is it? One has to have that message. There must be a carrier. Okay. Now we cannot possibly investigate every religion and cult in pursuit of finding our answer, so we will be only examining those that make the claim that the Creator has given them a religion to follow. We are simply not interested in any religion or cult that makes the claim that they have no connection with the Creator, because such religions are simply made up by humans. In other words, if we have a religion that claims that they themselves made up the religion without God in the picture, even if they do believe in God, we should simply just brush them off. We choose not to believe a religion openly based on individuals' opinions. We only care about the word and will of the Creator of the universe, not humans. Although there are several religions that claim the Creator of the universe has a connection with them, there is not enough time to thoroughly investigate all in this book, And it says here in the footnote that there's a YouTube channel by Rabbi Yehoshua Zitron that he basically has a playlist called the Divinity Playlist, and he investigates basically many popular religion and cults. So if you want to get more information on that, you could just type in the Divinity Playlist by Rabbi Yehoshua Zitron. Okay, fine. So basically the idea is what? That there's so many religions and cults. It's already easy. You could do process of elimination. Meaning, if you have a religion that, like, for example, that believes in like billions of gods, or that, like, doesn't have any connection to God. Like, I'll give you, I think Buddhism is a good example. We'll talk about it later. But for example, Buddhism, I debated a Buddhist monk. I had a crazy debate with him for like 2 hours, whatever. I told him, where's your evidence? What's your claims? There was no claim for anything. There's just a claim Buddhist is a nice teachings that make your life better. That's it. There's no claim to truth. They don't claim God gave them anything. So as soon as the religion claims God didn't give them a message, then I don't care what you have to say. Great, you have some nice instructions how to live nice. I'll listen to, if I want to get some good information on life ethics, I'll go to, secular like ethics. I'll go to Tony Robbins and I'll read, one of these books or something, these self-help books. Like, I'm trying to figure out who's the right religion here, So if you're not making that claim, you're out, strike out. So right there, out of the, tens of thousands of religions and cults, I think like almost 95% of them you could cross out, because 95% of them don't have any relationship to God. They have no connection, no purpose. They don't claim anything. So really, in this book, we're going to examine the best-selling book in the entire world history, with over 5 billion copies sold and distributed, the Jewish Bible, the Torah. And so basically, we're going to look into the religion that do make the claim that God gave them, and that's usually the monotheistic religions, basically. All the other religions, polytheistic religion, don't have any like claim to truth or anything. They don't, really, they don't have solid foundations. So that's where the monotheistic religions, at least, I'm not saying all of them are 100% from God, right? But I'm saying the ones that, at least they make the claim God gave them something. So I'm going to give them attention rather than other people who don't make that claim. Okay, fine. Now, Judaism is one of the world's oldest religions, and many religions we actually see today stem from Judaism. These are called the Abrahamic religions. We'll examine the 3 most well-known Abrahamic religions in the world, which claim the Bible is the foundation of the religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We know that out of the 3 major Abrahamic religions, by the way, some other Abrahamic religions are the Baha'i faith, the Druze faith, all this stuff. We know out of the major Abrahamic religions, the first religion in chronological order is Judaism, which started approximately 3,330 years ago, right? I think 1313 BCE. Okay, fine. Now, furthermore, the logic we'll use in the book is the following. If someone makes the claim that he received some sort of religious document from the Creator, and this document has any sort of factual mistake in it or any contradictions, then we can logically come to the conclusion that it most probably was not given by the Creator. This is especially true if there is no solid explanation in the tradition, which could explain the contradiction or mistake. This is because God does not make any errors. As we have said before, He is perfect. As soon as a person finds even one mistake in a book that claims to be God-given, how can they be sure that everything else in the book is not a mistake as well? The idea is what? I'm coming with you a book. I'm saying, here's a book. God gave me a book. God gave me instructions, right? Now, if you see that book, and the book literally has mistakes, contradictions, it doesn't make sense, whatever, then you know what I'm going to do? If I see mistakes and contradictions, I, as a human being, I have to work with my brain. I have to work with logic. I'm making the logical conclusion: God is infinite. God's a base above space and time. He's perfect. He doesn't make mistakes. Now, if your book comes and you claim it's from God, and I see in that book you literally make child errors, mistakes kids wouldn't even make, then I already know right there this book is not from God, right? Just that's pure logic. So that's where we're gonna now in the book we're gonna be going through different religions and cults. But let me see something. I lost the page. Okay, so we said if you see one mistake, how do you know everything else is not a mistake? Now we're about to talk about different religions. The book is about to disprove, Christianity, Islam, all this stuff. So before even getting into the conversation, this is not a conversation where, God forbid, putting anybody down, saying we're better than anybody. It has nothing to do with that. This whole conversation is what? We're trying to figure out what's the truth, okay? So we're trying to figure out what we're trying to figure out of all the religions, which one makes the most sense. Okay? This is not, so if we go through religion and we show mistakes in that religion, that doesn't mean the people of that religion are bad. That doesn't mean anything. Okay? All it means is, from our perspective, from what we looked into based off the evidence is pointing towards that religion not being from God, and that's it. And we obviously say we want to listen to whatever God says, and we don't want to go by the word of man. We don't care about humans. We care about what God, right? So this is no way to offend anybody. No, putting down each religion. There's beautiful things of every religion and beautiful teachings, and obviously, people have the right to choose whatever religion they want to follow. But now we're going from we're trying to be from a skeptic perspective, and we're trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong. What's logical, what makes sense, and what doesn't make sense. So that introduction, let's get started. So let's talk about Christianity, okay? Christianity began about 1,300 years after Judaism, so about 2,000 years ago, and discusses the story of the life and teachings of Jesus. According to some scholars, Jesus was born in the city of Nazareth in the north of Israel around 4 BCE. He is the main figure in Christianity, one of the world's largest religions, consisting of 2.4 billion people. Mainstream Christian belief is that Jesus was God in human form and that he also was the Jewish Messiah. For a few years, Jesus preached his teaching until his death. Christians believe that his death atoned for the sins of humanity and that after he died, he rose from the dead. It is important to know that all Christians agree that the Jews received the Torah at Mount Sinai. They just call the Jewish written Torah, the Jewish Bible, they call it the Old Testament, and claim that God gave them part 2, which they call the New Testament. The New Testament mainly discusses the teachings and life of Jesus and consists of the 27 books, which contain the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Acts of Apostles, the 14 epistles of Paul, the 7 general epistles, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, and the book of Revelation. So Judaism is the Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible. So Torah is the 5 books of Moses. Then after Moses died, there's Joshua, the book of Judges, the book of Shmuel, Isaiah, Malachi, Zechariah, whatever, right? And then you have the scriptures, which is Megillat Esther, the book of Esther, the book of Ruth, Psalms, all these Tehillim, right? All these things. That's the Tanakh. Now the Christians say that after the Tanakh, boom, God gave part 2, Christianity, which was all the books that we just mentioned. Okay. Now, if these books are a continuation of the Old Testament, the written Torah, the Jewish Torah, as the Christians claim, then that means that the New Testament cannot contradict the Old Testament, especially regarding historical events, as they must have been given by the same author, God, because Christians believe God gave that. So if God gave part 1 and God gave part 2 can't contradict part 1. And if you see part 2 contradicts part 1, that might show you something iffy, that something is going on with part 2 that's a little bit iffy. Okay. So, as mentioned earlier, what time is it right now? Okay. As mentioned earlier, if someone makes a claim that they received a book from God, then for that book to be divine, it must not have any mistakes. This is because God is perfect and does not make mistakes. On the other hand, humans are imperfect and can easily make mistakes. When we review the New Testament, the Christian Bible, not the Old Testament, we're not talking about the Old Testament, the New Testament. So the Old Testament is the Torah, the Tanakh, and the New Testament is the Christian Bible. So when we review the New Testament, the many mistakes and contradictions found inside clearly show that the book was written by humans, meaning it was not divinely inspired and not by God. Meaning this has no connection to God. It's straight up human beings, coming up with and writing these things and no connection to God. Meaning it's not divinely inspired. The Torah, everything, the 5 books of Moses, God told Moses, each letter, each word, that's from God. The prophets, God gave them a message and they wrote everything down, meaning it's all divine. It's all divine. It's all divinely written, right? But the New Testament, no connection to God at all. It's a new person came later on in history, basically made part 2, wrote something and claimed it's from God, right? That's what we're trying to say here. So here are a few of the many mistakes found in the New Testament. Okay, let's start with number 1. And if we finish, maybe we'll do the next one later. The New Testament tells us the story of Joseph. The New Testament tells us the story of a young woman named Mary who is engaged to a man named Joseph. One day, the angel Gabriel came to Mary and told her that she would give birth to the Son of God who would be called Jesus. This birth was a miraculous virgin birth in which Joseph took absolutely no part in. So it was a virgin birth. When Joseph found out that Mary was pregnant, he planned to break off the engagement. But before he could break it off, the angel Gabriel appeared to him and said that this child is special. Gabriel told Joseph that this child was going to be the Jewish Messiah. Upon hearing this, Joseph decided to stay with Mary and raise Jesus. So basically, the story of Jesus, his mom, God is basically Jesus' real dad. It's a virgin birth. God impregnated Mary. And based off that, they have like a divine son, a son that basically the Messiah, who some Christians believe he's also God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. That's what they say. And okay, fine. So now, furthermore, before relating the story of Mary and Joseph, the New Testament lists the genealogy of 27 generations, starting from King David until Joseph and Jesus. This is Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 through 17. So this genealogy is mentioned in order to link Joseph and Jesus' lineage to King David. Because according to the Bible, the Jewish Messiah must be a descendant of King David. That's what we see in Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 5 to 6. So, meaning what? The New Testament basically is trying to prove that Jesus is Messiah. In order to be Messiah, the Bible, the part 1, the Tanakh, which they agree to, says you have to be descendant of King David. So part 2, the New Testament, brought a whole lineage from King David, right? King David's descendants going to be the Messiah. So they tried proving that Jesus' lineage all the way to King David through Joseph. Okay, fine. So everything looks good here. Since Christianity believes in the validity of the Jewish Bible, which consists of the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and scriptures, the New Testament wanted to reveal the lineage of King David to Joseph to prove that the Messiah will come from Joseph. However, a critical issue arises. When the New Testament finishes describing all the generations, it clearly states that Joseph took no part in the conception of Jesus. That's actually after the genealogy. So imagine chapters 1 through 17 is proving Jesus is the descendant of King David through Joseph. And then, that's verses 1 through 17. And then verse 18, the next verse says Joseph had no connection to Jesus. He took no part in the conception. Joseph went away and came back to pregnant Mary, who claimed to be impregnated by God. Right? That's Matthew 1:18. Which means that Mary and God were the mother. And God, so Mary was the mother of Jesus, and God was the father of Jesus. However, here lies the critical issue. If the Messiah has to be paternally and genetically descended from King David, right? And you could prove that it has to be paternally from the footnote right here. I'm not going to go through the footnote, but if you see an Indisputable Truth, you can see that footnote that proves that it has to be from the father and not from the mother, based on what tribe you're from. If the Messiah has to be paternally and genetically descended from King David, and the father of Jesus is supposed to be God, then is God a descendant of King David? Obviously not. This means that Jesus is not descended from King David and cannot be the Jewish Messiah like the New Testament says. How could the New Testament make such a critical error? You're going through all this time. You're making, Jesus, King David had Solomon. Solomon had Rehoboam. Rehoboam had until you had Joseph, and Joseph had Jesus. Okay, see, Jesus is a descendant of King David. Then one line later, you say Jesus is not a descendant of King David. You say his father is God. And is God, and to be Messiah, you have to be a descendant of King David from your father. Is God a descendant of King David? No. So how can the New Testament make such a mistake? Additionally, why did the New Testament spend almost a full page linking Joseph to King David, when Joseph clearly was not the father of Jesus? If you examine the 2 books of the New Testament, Matthew and Luke, they both give significantly different genealogies linking Joseph and Jesus to King David. If the New Testament is the Word of God, could it be really that God forgot or was confused about the lineage of the Messiah? To this day, Christian scholars still have no solid explanation for both of these significant mistakes and contradictions in the New Testament. Could it really be that God would give such a book with such an obvious and severe mistakes? Right? Okay, fine. Let's end here. We'll go to disproof number 2 for Christianity. Thank you for listening.